One more step. Okay, we're about to go live, and when we do, Colin, you can start the recording when I say we're going to go live.
Looks like you are live up on Workplace, Mr. Workman, and it looks like it's also recording.
Okay, great. So, hey, welcome Century 21 to talk to the C21 pros with our host, Crexi. And I just want to thank everybody for joining. We are streaming live on Workplace for those of you who are on the Zoom call. So you can go check that out later if you want to invite colleagues to see the replay. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Ashley Kobovitch and Paul Cohen. Paul is the National Director for Crexi. Ashley is the account executive, and Ashley's going to introduce our panelists today. So Ashley, take it away.
Oh, thank you, Randy. First and foremost, really excited to be here with you all, and a big thanks to Randy Workman for bringing this all together. Randy and I did the first Century 21 webinar when we announced this partnership with Crexi, and has been amazing throughout the entire process. So big thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Randy.
So introducing our speakers today, first up, we have Loren Keim. He is coming to us from Allentown, PA, where he's the president of his firm, C21 Keim Realtors. Loren is also a member of the faculty at Lehigh University. He's also authored many books. Some titles include How to Sell Your Home in Any Market, The Fundamentals of Commercial Real Estate, which I'll be picking up after this, and Real Estate Prospecting, The Ultimate Resource, just to name a few. Loren has educated and trained brokers, not only in North America, but also in 20 countries worldwide. So pleasure to have you with us.
Thanks.
Next up, we have Mr. John DeMarco. So John is joining us from the greater New York City area, Hudson Valley, my old neck of the woods, and has seen real estate from every angle. So before starting his own firm, John worked as the director of corporate real estate for global tech giant IBM. You may have heard of them. Negotiating leases all over the nation as well as internationally. And he currently sits as the president of his firm, Innovation Real Estate Solutions, which he established in 2017 to offer a whole host of real estate consulting services, along with the brokerage affiliation of C21, of course. So very excited to have you, John. And last but not least, we have Stephen Karbelk. Stephen is joining us from Ashburn, Virginia, where he runs his own firm called Real Markets and is affiliated with C21 New Millennium. Stephen has had an extensive career, not only in brokerage, but also in auctions, and is an expert in legal sales as well, so including bankruptcy and foreclosure. He's also authored several books on the topics, so I can also pick those up, or you guys can send them to me, and worked in over 34 states nationwide. So happy to have you with us, Stephen. Thank you all so much for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. So we're really excited to have you guys. One of the things we like to do at Crexi is not just, here's Crexi, here's how you click that button and that button. What we want to do is add some real value to brokers all across the country. And at Century 21, you guys have been great partners with us. We love Randy and what he's done for us. You've kind of welcomed us. And as we grow, we want to help brokers grow and do better in their business. The platform is great. Hopefully everyone tries it, uses it, and sells it. But what I want to get in today is some real tips that people can take away with them to help them sell more in 2020. We're halfway through the year, still another 6 months to go. So hopefully in the next 45, 50 minutes, I want to go through some real tips on how you guys are crushing it and selling a bunch of commercial real estate out there. Just as a reminder, if this is your first time on a Zoom call, it's interactive. You can use the Q&A feature. It's somewhere floating around the side of your screen somewhere. Click on that, ask any question. There are no stupid questions. We may have some stupid answers, but no stupid questions. And we'll get to those throughout the call. So without any further ado, let's get into it. I'm going to pick Stephen. He looks like he's ready to go. And I want to start really where the real estate business starts, right? Leads. You're owner of a company, you've got a bunch of agents after you, working under you. How do you make rain? How are you a rainmaker? How do you get business in the door? What are some of the tips that people can do right now to help them get more business?
Well, first, thanks for the opportunity to be on this panel. Certainly enjoy it. A big part of my business and what I encourage the agents on my real estate team, as well as Century 21 Commercial, New Millennium, is that you need to focus on building relationships where you can get repeat business from repeat clients. So many agents just pursue a single client to get a single listing, and to do 25 deals, they need to do 25 proposals or 50 proposals. And life's much easier if you can just identify those clients that can give you, say, 5 deals a year. And if you have 5 clients that are going to give you 5 deals a year, that's 25 deals. You got a commission every other week, and you're not spending all your time doing proposals, but you're spending your time doing business. That's a really big piece. But to get to that point, you really need to be identified within a certain community as an expert. I like to say that you don't want to be a secret agent. If you're an expert in something, then let the world know that you're really good at a certain niche. You should write about it. It should be your message. When people ask you what you do, that's what you say. And so people know when to call you. And then that's what generates a lot of leads.
And so what are some of those things that you can do? I mean, there's 100 different ways to get leads, but what are some of the big ticket items that people can do? Like, after this call, hang up, what should they do to get their next big client?
They need to define who they are so people know when you should be called. How many times have we all had friends that maybe it's someone that you play tennis with or you play basketball with or whatever, and you really never knew what they did. And then one day you tell them, oh, I bought a property. And they're like, why didn't you call me? And you're like, well, I didn't know you actually did that.
Yeah.
You never told me, right? And so if there's one takeaway is you need to be crystal clear when you're interacting with any prospective client when they should call you. And it's okay for you to say when they shouldn't call you. Because if you just say, call me on everything, then everything is nothing. But if you say, when you're, for me, for instance, I tell people that if you're really having, say, financial distress, I'm really good in distress situations. I'm really good in uncomfortable situations. And so people will remember that. So it becomes a trigger. As soon as someone's in that situation, then it triggers your name. But if you don't give them that trigger, then it's not going to go anywhere.
What about trust? What about trust, though? I mean, I think that's a big part of the business, right? People want people to work for them, but they don't know that they're really the expert on it. And they don't know that they should trust them. I mean, I'll hand it over to John. I mean, I feel like, John, you probably have a lot of clients that trust you with their business. What have you done to build that trust over the years?
Well, I agree. I agree with what was just said. But I like to think of establishing my credibility through credible clients. So a client's not a client, right? Certain clients have a lot of presence in your market, and the more of them that you can get talking about you, the better, instead of you just talking about yourself. So it's not, you need to talk about yourself, but it's really, it grows exponentially if you can get people with a lot of presence in the market, a lot of credibility themselves to recommend you. So whenever you're dealing with a highly credible client, you should be thinking about the next deal, the next deal, the next deal as you work through that current deal. And it may not be with that exact client, but it may be through a referral. And I find that to be something that you should always keep in mind. Leverage those really high credibility clients.
Absolutely. I mean, I didn't mention this, but I was a broker for 28 years. And, the first 5 years I did it the hard way, right? Like you said, one transaction at a time. And when you got that great client, I mean, one great client I got, we almost died together during our private pilot's license. We decided to fly to the Bahamas and almost crashed. That builds, I'm not suggesting you do that to build trust with your clients. It's probably a high risk way to do it. But that, for 20 years, that guy was a very good friend and a client. So if you can have a friend and client, that's great. Loren, you've written some books. Presumably that brings business in the door. What else are you doing?
It does. Actually, I'm kind of curious. Was it you that almost crashed or was it him that almost crashed?
Well,
Because if it was you, I can see the client not coming back, but if it was him, he feels guilty, so he has to give you as
guilty,
much
yes,
business as he
yeah.
can.
By the way, if you're going to use that approach, make sure you're not the one that kills them, that they're the one that almost kills you.
Got
Right.
it. Okay. I wanted
Hopefully
to
everybody's
understand
writing
that.
this down. Hopefully you're writing this down.
Definitely. I also got a kick out of Stephen saying that it's calling for uncomfortable situations, because I've got a couple of ideas there. So when we're looking to generate leads, both of them said the same thing, which is, in a way, you've got to build that referral network, and that's absolutely true. But sometimes you have to start somewhere too. So when we're generating leads, trying to find buyers and sellers, investors, we've got a couple of choices to make. Obviously, you can pick up the phone and you can call potential clients, look for the most likely people who are going to buy and sell and try and go after those. Or you can pay for leads. You can prospect one way or another. I do want to give a shout out to Crexi, of course, for putting all of this together. But I think one of the reasons Crexi works so well is that clients can actually see everything that is on the market without having to pay for those, to be able to search. You know, that other site that shall not be named has a very high cost per listing to actually highlight it. It has a cost for consumers to go in and search. If we can get sites like Crexi in front of most of our clients, we have a better shot at those clients searching those types of sites first, because they can see everything that's available. They're looking for a platform that really allows them to narrow their search criteria, to search by cap rate, to search by product type, size, and price, and Crexi really delivers. And it allows us to build a database of clients that we can follow up with. It's an easy to use platform, and they're willing to share their contact information in return for using the platform, and allows us to obtain some leads.
Yeah.
So yes, you can go to a site like Reonomy or Prospect Now and try and pull potential sellers, potential listings, potential buyers, try and build a database and cold call. That's one method of doing it. Crexi's putting together an all-encompassing platform that allows us then to market those properties and generate leads of potential clients, which I think is what you're showing us now. Some of the
Yeah. While you were talking, it just occurred to me to pull this up. And this is a real deal that's on Crexi. Bizarrely enough, the broker's name is also John DeMarco, but it's not you. It's a different one. He's down in Hollywood, but maybe he'll split a commission with you or something. But
That would be nice.
yeah, I'll let him know. But what you can do here is you can come in. Sure, like you said, you can go to one of those sites and get a list of all the owners in your area, cold call them, or you could just come into Crexi and look at your listings, and there's a list of people who are active right now. You just click on their name, boom, and the lead drawer opens up, and there's their phone number. Call them up, find out what they're interested in. They're interested in hotels in Hollywood, Florida. If you've got some for sale, great person to call. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, Loren.
Hey, Paul.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's Colin. I got a Q&A that popped up on the screen here.
Sure, go for it, man. Yeah.
Could be a good time to bring it up, since our very established commercial team here had a chance to introduce themselves. Sounds like we have someone who's new to commercial real estate. And the question is, how do brand new commercial agents begin to establish a name for themselves?
Wow, that's how long, that's the whole webinar right there. I mean,
Exactly.
Stay on this one.
Starts at 2:00.
Stephen, go ahead. I think you got some ideas on that.
Wow, there's a lot to take in there. I would say that the first thing is that you need to mentor with a seasoned senior broker, because the thing about commercial real estate is that, unlike residential, where if you sold a single family home, you've pretty much sold a single family home. But in commercial, you have all the different property types, as Paul's pulling up. And just because you've sold a shopping center doesn't mean you know how to sell a multifamily building or industrial or some special use property. So if you can align yourself with someone and learn the ropes that way, that's important. And then the second is, and I've seen this way too often, where you have to control your image so that it's clear that you're in the commercial real estate business, and you have to look the part. You have to pay the money. You have to have the subscriptions, and you have to have the visibility, and you have to have the knowledge, and you have to keep pursuing that, and so that you're an expert. Because when you become successful, you're involved in multi-million-dollar decisions. And those decisions are only going to be made with people that the clients trust and are credible, just like we talked about in the beginning. And that kind of goes full circle.
Yeah.
Pursue your designations and just realize it's a journey. It's not something you just turn on.
Yeah, well, Loren?
If I can add to that, part of the problem when you're getting started is trying to build that book of business, and it's hard. Keep in mind, one out of every 20 agents who gets in the real estate business lasts more than 3 years. And commercial is tough to get started in. So you have to have some form of business you go after, and there's 2 ways to do it. One is to join a team, like Stephen said. You can become part of a team that's already doing business and start sharing in some of that business and grow that way. The other option is to go out and beat the pavement. And that may mean doing some things that you don't want to do, which is cold calling, trying to get in front of possible owners. There's a very successful commercial agent in Tennessee a few years back that actually went to an industrial park and stopped at every business in that industrial park every month and just stopped in, hey, looking to see if any businesses here are looking to expand and move into more space or looking to sell buildings, and ended up building a book of business just from one park. You've got to find a way to do it. And don't discount going after expired listings. And there are even commercial for sale by owners that you'll find even places like Craigslist, where you can contact those small owners and try and build a business starting from that. There are properties that go off the market every day. Try and find those properties, get in front of those clients, and have a solid game plan when you get there. Have the knowledge of what you need to do when you get in the door. And of course, with Century 21 Commercial, we've got some of the best training on earth. So learn what you need to learn, be ready for doing those presentations, but then go out and beat the pavement to try and build business. Those are the 2 major ways to get started when you're brand new and looking for business.
Yeah. And I just add to that. I think you're gonna add some things too. Go for it.
Yeah, I could. I was just going to say that I think, you don't wake up one day and just decide you want to do commercial, even if you've had 20 years of residential experience. You have to put yourself in a position where you can anticipate the questions that are going to come from a commercial client. They're very different than a residential client. And the only way you're going to do that is you really got to know the X's and O's to start with. So you need some training. You need to really invest in some education and then put yourself in a position to sound really smart when you're asked. If it's obvious. I mean, if you're not in that sort of position, it's going to, you'll actually hurt yourself rather than help yourself. So I think, getting the upfront X's and O's training is not something that you just pull out of the sky. It's something you got to invest in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Paul, if I could just interject real quick, because Loren brought this up. Most of the people should understand we have the advanced commercial advisor training, about 42 hours of training. Loren is the instructor for the intro course. We've got CCIM instructors for the advanced courses. That's a really good place to start, because you're going to get really X's and O training from proposed to close type information. And then also, besides the team thing, is surround yourself with good business partners, of which Century 21 also has. So if you're not familiar with those, go to 21 Online and find those.
Good. And so everyone knows how to get hold of that. Definitely take up the training the company offers. I mean, that's why you join a national brand like Century 21. The last thing I'll say before we move on is, the benefit you have, the guy that asked the question, I don't know who it was, but the big thing that you have is you're hungry, you're new in the business. So partner up with someone who's a listing machine. That would be my advice. And help them. In fact, if they're in Crexi and they have a pro account, you can just go in and say, hey, look, I'll call you. They might have 700 leads. You could go in, call all those leads, qualify them for them, and then bring them just the real deals and then participate in that. So partnering with somebody that knows how to do the business, I think, is so much easier than trying to figure it out on your own. It's such a hard business to learn. I tried to learn it on my own, and I wasted the first 5 years of my career. So don't make my mistake. So I want to move on to, so you've got the listing, right? You've got the business, you've got the client, and now they want to sell a property. And so the big problem I always see in commercial real estate, any real estate really, is what is a property worth, right? And I guess I'll start with Loren on this one. It's you can get a listing that nobody else wants. There's a $10 million listing that's worth $5 million. All the good brokers are passing. And they're like, wow, I just got myself a $10 million listing. This is great. But guess what? You're never going to sell it. How do you go about pricing assets? What's some of the questions you ask sellers to figure out if they're for real?
You need to know, you have to have the real income, the real expenses. You have to know the market is critical. It's funny. One of the things that I teach is pricing large properties like skyscrapers and shopping malls. And agents always think that's challenging to do. It's not. It's just looking at it at a different scale. But the key really is you need to know your market. You have to determine if your likely buyer is a property user or an investor. If you're selling a small retail outlet, you might get more for that property from somebody who's going to use it than from somebody who's going to invest in it. And if it is an investor, you've got to understand what the expectation of return is for the area and the product type you're in. So for example, if you're in Manhattan and you're looking at a tall building, you're probably at a 4.5 cap, but that's an office product. If you're in Jersey City, New Jersey, you're looking on a multifamily Class A property, you're trading at about a 5.5. If you're looking at Allentown, Pennsylvania, and you're looking at a typical Class B apartment building, you're looking at probably a 10 cap. If you're looking in the coal regions of Pennsylvania, you might be looking at 13 or 14. And one of the ways you can do this, it's always a function of risk and a function of what investors' expectations are for the growth in revenue and NOI. And again, using Crexi, it's a great source to determine what the cap rates are of similar properties in the area. So what looks like he's pulling up is we can filter properties that are either listings or have recently sold. We can pull up comps and be able to go through that and try and figure out what the most recent sales have trended at. If you find 4 or 5 multifamily properties in the same region that are all trending between 8 and 9 cap, get a pretty good idea what the range is. Now you have to narrow that and try and figure out what that price is and be able to sell it back to the owner. If on the other hand, the property is likely for a user like a gas station or something like that, you're going to have to compare it with other properties that are similar. And again, you can go to a software package like Crexi and look for similar product types to try and compare and figure out what it is. So Crexi does have comps that allows you to pull up the sale price, some of the specifics about it, hopefully nail down that cap rate to try and figure out where those properties are trading, come up with an honest evaluation of what it's really worth.
Right. What about you, Stephen? I mean, do you like to dig under the hood and don't take the client at face value, or why are they selling? How do you handle that?
So I think that in the pandemic market that we're all living in, you also have to peel back that onion and ask them, why are they really selling? Because I think we're going to find some situations where a property may trade or should trade at a certain cap rate, but the client doesn't have the time to wait. And that you may have to price it more aggressively because the client needs it sold right away. For whatever reason they have going on. And you're going to have that. You're going to have tragedies and horrible situations. And someone owns a very nice commercial property, but they're in a personal situation that's driving them to have to sell that property right away. And I think a lot of brokers in a normal market, they would be very focused on price and trying to get the most amount of price they can for a seller. But other times when you're in this type of market, you need to just figure out, is price really the most important thing for them? And just because you think it is, doesn't mean it is for the seller. And so you should ask them what's driving it, because they may have other demands and they may be willing to accept less in order to make it trade quickly.
Yeah.
I'll follow up on that if you like.
Sure. Yeah, please.
Yeah, I mean, it's not always all about price. So I agree with what Stephen was just saying. Whenever I price a deal, I kind of look at 4 things. One is certainly the financials, but I look at those 2 ways: what it is today and what it could be. So you need to be able to look pro forma, sort of what's the highest view of the P&L, as well as what does it look like today. You have to look at the infrastructure of the building. What kind of infrastructure risk is there? Does it require, a roof in a year or 2? Is the heating system fine, et cetera? You have to look at the rent roll and the tenant risk right? What's the term on the leases? How are the rents versus market? Is there upside potential, or are you already at the high end of the market and there's nothing but downside potential? And then the other thing I like to look at is something I call wow factor, which kind of trumps everything. Right now, I'm selling a horse farm that they don't care what the financials look like. They don't care about NOI and cap rate, and frankly, they don't care about infrastructure or tenant risk. They're either going to fall in love with this horse farm or not. And for a particular type of buyer, the approach in selling that type of property is totally different. So, I don't think there's like most things in commercial real estate, there's not a cookie cutter answer, but those are generally the things that I look at when I price a deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, another thing that I'd like to add is, and I think residential agents that make the switch or dabble in the commercial side miss this a lot, and they have it in my experience, which is the adaptive reuse or highest and best use of an asset. And so they look at it at a face value and say, that's an office building. They know how to do an NOI calculation and they come up with a valuation, but they miss the whole idea that this could be torn down and turned into an apartment complex and be worth 3 times as much money. And in a market like, certainly up in the Northeast, which is very dense, I think people miss that one a lot. So that's why you really got to work with would you recommend that if you're a residential agent, should you partner with a commercial agent, or is it just something that maybe they should have a shot at and figure maybe they work it out? What's your recommendation there? It's a loaded question, I know, but what's your recommendation?
Half a loaf is always better than no loaf. So you've got a better shot at listing the property. You have a better shot at selling the property if it's priced right and if you have somebody strong that knows the market going in. So it's always better to get something rather than nothing, and you're learning along the way as well. So I think it makes sense to take along an experienced agent with you if you don't know that market or that product type.
Totally.
Yeah. So, all right. So you finally get the listing, right? What's the next step? You go to market it. So let's go to John. I know you're a bit of a marketer yourself, so I'm sure you got some insight on this. How are you getting your deals out to the world? What are your go-to strategies for getting your deals sold?
Oh, there's so many different ways of doing it.
I know there's a lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah, I try to channel my 2 thoughts when it comes to marketing into 2 areas. One is mass marketing, and then target marketing. So there's a lot of tools that are available to. When I say mass marketing, what I mean is I want people like Loren and Steve to see what I have, because they're brokers that have large spheres of influence beyond what I have. So, you want to reach the brokerage community, and, Crexi helps you do that, obviously. But the other thing that Crexi does is it helps you also with target marketing. So it's easy to sort of download or your collateral, your flyers or your brochures, and it's easy to do property blasts. The harder part in the target marketing is identifying who exactly you want to send it to. When I say target, I'm not really talking about reaching out to the broker community as much as I am reaching out direct to buyers or investors. So it could be, for example, I have a property right now that has 12 years left on the term. It's got a single tenant. The rent's in a good spot. It's a perfect 1031 candidate. Cap rate's good. He's looking to do a sale and a leaseback. So for somebody looking for a low risk 1031 deal, this is a great product. So now I want to blast that product out to anybody and everybody that deals in the 1031 market, within a range, a certain range and of geography. And so that's a good example. The horse farm example I gave earlier, that would be a different example, but I'd want to target, people that are in that industry. So there's various ways, there's different services you can buy that can help you get email lists of clients or companies that are in different business segments. One other good resource that I have found is the Chamber of Commerce in a lot of communities is often very good. You can typically go to their databases and you can download pages and pages of people that are in a certain industry. And with just a couple of clicks, you can get their emails and you can start to develop a list. Go to Crexi, download your material, and blast it out to that community. And hopefully you'll land the deal with someone, on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. And, so one of the things we do at Crexi really well, you said mass market and then target market. One thing we do at Crexi is we do a mass market. So I pulled up on the screen. This is one that went out to 54,000 people interested in opportunity zones on opportunity zone deals that we have in Crexi. And then what we do is we also use an algorithm to pull up a list of a targeted market of people who just recently looked at a multifamily deal in Pennsylvania and then pushed all the Pennsylvania deals to those specific buyers. So it's very targeted. But one kind of pet peeve I have is that people get all these leads from Crexi, but they're waiting for the buyer to call them and send them an offer. How do you feel about, do you get your leads from Crexi? Are you calling them? Are you selling the deals, or are you waiting for them to send you an offer? And I think Loren's chuckled at that one, so I'll go with you first.
Too many agents honestly sit back and wait for something to come to them. And I think that's where agents tend to fail. You've got to be out there trying to call those people back. And honestly, if you're a strong listing agent, you're putting stuff on the market, you don't have the time to make those calls, bring somebody else on. Pay them at a lower percentage, let's say, but bring somebody on who's going to make those calls, follow up with those clients, and hopefully pick up some deals that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And I do think one of the nice things here is that it is getting that information out everywhere. Part of the problem we run into with so many commercial brokers is they hide everything. They don't want anybody to know about their inventory because they want to try and double end it. That's not in the best interest of your clients. You want to make sure that it's everywhere you possibly can so you can get that highest price for your client, and you're far more likely to sell it and get a decent price for that client. And they're going to come back and create that repeat business that I think Stephen was talking about earlier.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. People need to remember in commercial real estate, when you're making a phone call to a lead, it's normally a warm call. They want to know you. Unlike residential, where a lot of times you would just get hung up on, and commercial real estate, they want to talk to you. And they're either going to tell you something, they're either going to be interested in your property, or they're going to tell you something you don't know about your property, or they may know somebody that may be interested in the property, but one way or the other, it's a new relationship and you should take advantage of that. But Paul, I'm going to add in one more piece to this, which I'm sure is near and dear to your heart. And that is, you have to have professional photography. The agents that are not doing that they just have to stop. Professional photography has become so inexpensive. And you can even use places like House Lens. It doesn't matter if they're residential. So many of those photographers have a lot of commercial experience, and it's inexpensive. And if the property is not worth paying the 125 to 250 for photography, you probably shouldn't be taking the listing in the first place.
Absolutely right.
And that's it. And then I'll tell you the other piece is, I've been very fortunate. My daughter works for the team, and she does all of our marketing. And so I've got my Gen Xer to push everything out on the social media, but also to get it on get it on Crexi right away, and making sure that we use all the various resources. Every Monday morning, we get the spreadsheet with all the leads for all of our listings. So if you missed the lead that came across your email, you get it again to make sure every single person's been called. And that's just really effective. And but it all starts with the image. If they can't get past the first photo, nothing else matters. And so that's right.
We actually did an analysis a few months back, and because Crexi, it's the only site you can actually get offers from, LOIs sent directly to you. People click on the site, send an offer. And we're like, well, what's accounting for this? And one of the major factors was every one of those listings had a great picture. I mean, it just jumped out. And now maybe that's cause and effect. I don't know. Maybe people spent the money on the picture because it was a great listing. I don't know. But if you're right, if you don't spend the money on the picture, you probably shouldn't take the listing. Are you guys using anything for virtual tours? Like, I don't want to mention any names, but there are a bunch of sites out there that well, I'll mention one I think is pretty good, Matterport. It will go in, it will take you can basically do a virtual tour of the property. You guys doing anything like that, or just videos?
We're doing a lot of that. I'm mixed on Matterport. The problem with Matterport is it doesn't do exterior. And when you're looking at commercial, industrial, office, I think the exterior is very important, but it is nice to be able to walk through the building. Also, if the building's huge, it can get really, really expensive trying to do Matterport. We typically, I've done Matterport, but we typically do a drone tour. And we have actually a relatively regional guy instead of one of the national firms. But they do, I mean, they're not cheap, but they do a fantastic job doing the location, coming down into the building, showing the exterior. And then when they're going through, their guys actually have cameras that are on gimbals. So they hold them perfectly firm. It's like walking through the building.
Yeah.
And they just come out beautifully. But I think that's critical for trying to get investors from other parts of the country to look at these properties. Just like photos are, I think it's important. But one other comment on what Stephen said that I thought was interesting. He pointed out social media. One of the nice things about social media is you can specifically target your audience as well. You can pay, whether it's Facebook or someone else, but you can actually pay them to find who are the most likely candidates to buy an investment property, to buy a warehouse or a shopping center, and try and push that into their news feeds to try and attract that person to you, which I think is a nice tool as well.
Yeah, yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit. So you got the listing, and maybe let's say it was a little bit overpriced, all right? Yeah, but it still could sell. It's been a while now, 6 months. You're worried about losing the listing. What are some of the things you're doing to communicate with your clients? I mean, how important is communicating with your client during the whole listing process? And I'll start with John on this one.
Well, I mean, I don't, I do think there's a point where you can communicate too much, but you got to go a long way to get to that point. Communicating is really, really important. And I think data is really important. I mean, if you're communicating with just words, you start to sound a little repetitive before you know it. And I think the more data you have when you communicate, the better off you are. So that could be data about the market. It could be data about people who have looked at your listing, which, obviously the activity report is what you're pulling up now. Crexi does a great job at that. I kind of view, I have a lot of listings, and I kind of view that I stare at those listings, and I use a football analogy. I try to move them all 5 yards down the field every day. But there's certain ones that are in marinate mode where I just did something with it yesterday. There's no need to communicate on it today. So let it marinate for a day or so. Let me work on the ones that really require an action. You really have to look at your listings and ask yourself, am I overdue for a communication with the client? And if I am, what am I going to tell them? Rehearse the story. Because if you don't have a story, what are you saying? You start to sound dull. That's just my view.
No, it's good. I like that. Sort of just kind of almost like I always pictured it like a plate spinner. Those plate spinners, like they spin one and then they move on to the next one, but you got to keep them all going, right? That's kind of how I always looked at it. But interesting, you mentioned football analogies. I always used a football analogy for the pricing of an asset. Like, at $5 million, it's just an extra point, right? Anyone can pretty much kick that in the NFL. But the further out it is, the better a kicker you want. And so I used to say to the client, well, if you want this price or this price, I can get them all, but I don't know where we're going to end up. But that's how I used to kind of like use that analogy. And it sort of resonated with clients rather than telling them it's worth this much money. It's worth a range of prices, right? I guess in reality.
And if I could just make a point, a really key point is, and you have to understand, this is one of the, I'll say X's and O's. I mean, you got to understand the time value of money.
Yeah.
You're trying to squeeze out another 20K out of a deal that's going to take you 8 more months to close is not a smart thing to do. A lower price sooner is a lot better than cash in hand sooner is a lot better than a little bit more cash in hand later. Many cases. You got to be able to make that argument to your sellers. You'll convince them that they ought to act now, as opposed to taking the risk and acting later.
Yeah. So I have a question for you, Stephen. I know this is what you're going to say, but with communicating with clients and this time in COVID, it's kind of slowed things down. So could you add what you were going to say, and then maybe has COVID as a pandemic communicating with clients through that period, has that sort of been necessary for your business?
Yeah. So first, to add on to what John was saying, I think it's essentially, process helps get the price approved by the client.
Yeah.
If they feel confident that the process you went through justifies the price. And sort of a practice tip is to take screenshots or PDF, everything that you're doing, so that when the time comes where the client says, hey, I need to know where you marketed this listing, it's all sitting in a Dropbox somewhere, and you can quickly pull it together and not have to remember, what did I do 3 weeks ago? And you can pull up your reports that you have from Crexi and provide that and lead with that, because those are usually very good numbers, but copies of your emails and your posts and your all that. And it's very, very important. And then, in terms of communicating with clients, I've got my Zoom account. I mean, that's all you can really do now is do that. I rarely see clients anymore.
Do you think that will change? I mean, at some point in the future, when this is all past us, so you'd be like, oh, let's get back to meeting at a coffee shop, or you're just like so used to just jumping on a Zoom call. There's no travel time between Zoom calls, unfortunately, right? So do you think the world will now be a Zoom world?
I think more people will be in the Zoom world. I think that nothing replaces that initial interaction to build a relationship and rapport. But if it's just a status call, what have you, you can do it over Zoom. You don't have to drive 45 minutes to their office to have a 20-minute conversation about the property. I think people will accept it now.
Now they will accept
it. It varies by generation, right? A 30-something is going to think of that differently than a 60-something.
Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, I think if we tried this 6 months ago, hey, let me just do a Zoom call with you, to the client, they wouldn't have appreciated that. But now they're like, okay.
They would have thought you were lazy.
Yeah, I thought you're lazy.
Weren't interested, what have you. But now it's just efficiency. That's just the way it is. And then I think you have to be prepared, though. I would rather do a Zoom call than a conference call, because now you can put stuff up on the screen, and show them what's going on. And here, let's look at this data. And this is what this comp means. And you actually have a harder time doing that in person if you're passing them information, versus on the screen, you have their attention. Yeah,
for sure. No, it's definitely changed the way that we communicate. And the video camera thing was a little weird at first, to be honest with you, but I think we've all adapted to it. I haven't had any scares, if you know what I mean. So it's been pretty good. Loren, what about you? Anything to add on client communication and sort of keeping yourself in with the client while things are slow?
Sort of. Actually, I keep my camera off as much as humanly possible. That's just the way I am. On negotiating deals, client communication, I mean, part of the challenge is everybody wants too much for their property. We all know that.
Yeah.
And the goal is to try and help them to see reality as quickly as possible. And what both John and Stephen said is absolutely correct. The only thing I'd add to it is people tend to fall into different personality categories, different types. Mm-hmm. And you have to approach different personality traits differently. So what might work with a client that is very domineering might not work with a different type of client. So we have to have different approaches to those clients, but everything's education. It's staying in constant communication, showing them what's happening every step of the way, and being able to communicate where you are in the process and why you have to negotiate that price, why you have to potentially come down a little bit or tweak something in order to make it work. Yeah, for sure.
So let's the last question I really have is, so the end of the cycle, right? It's closing the deal. That's the best part of the transaction. That's where you're almost about to get paid, but there's always the last minute snafus, the retrade, and, you're counting on this deal to close. And, the day before the contract is about to go hard, the buyer calls up and says, wait a minute, and that's when your world falls apart. What are some of the things you guys have done over the years to kind of avoid that or prepare for that? Or is there anything you can do to prepare for that? And let's go with John on that.
Yeah, that's a good question, especially now with COVID. I'm finding that there's a lot of deals that they're at risk right up until, maybe even more so now, right up until check signing moment, I don't think you can take your foot off the pedal until you've actually closed the deal and you're walking away with a check. What I try to do is when I get to that 99-yard line, I really like to try to make both the buyer and the seller feel good about what they're doing. So you may be thinking that the benchmarking ended when you priced the deal, but at the end of the deal, it can be almost more important because now you're saying, look, this deal was just done at this level, at that cap rate, cost per square foot, whatever the metric is you want to use. You can use that as a way to make the seller feel good about the price he's getting. And you can also look for ways to make the buyer feel good about, the price they're paying. And I'm not saying make it up. I'm saying use real data, but try to do that because the best deals are the ones that everybody feels happy leaving the table, and they're going to refer you the next time. Both sides will refer you the next time if they feel good about it.
Yeah. What about you, Stephen?
Also, I see you're bringing up on the due diligence room and access to documents. So one of the risks that you always have in a transaction is that if you do not have a data room for your information, then you run the risk of forgetting to share information with a prospect and that it surfaces at the last minute that you knew something that you didn't disclose or forgot about or what have you. And the best thing to do is just have all your data in one place. Then you haven't forgotten it. And especially when it's a complex deal, say you're doing a multifamily transaction that has a 90-day due diligence period. You constantly have new financials, new tenants, new rent rolls, new information, new utility bills, and you're sharing on one side of the transaction or the other. And if you just put it all in one central due diligence area, then you never forget it, and you're protected, and all the parties have all the information that they need. But the second thing I would add on to what John was saying is that you do have to anticipate where there's going to be a problem and be ready. Hope isn't a strategy. Don't just sit back and hope they forget or hope whatever. Be prepared. And if you see that they're asking lots of questions about a certain issue, then be prepared to address it with your client. And so that when the news shows up, it's not a surprise. And if it doesn't show up, then you're pleasantly surprised. But that's what you should really do.
For my strategy was always to go on vacation the week that it was about to close, just so they didn't call me about commission. I would be outside of cell phone coverage. So good luck with the closing. But that's why I'm no longer a broker. So that's I'm not good at that. Loren, what about you? I mean, you've probably got some stories to share, but what have you
usually horror stories, but no, I mean, they covered it pretty well. The idea is to maintain constant contact at the end. I don't go on vacation right when it's about to close, but it won't matter either way.
That's why you guys
try and maintain that constant contact. So like both John and Stephen said, if you see something coming up, you can try and address it earlier in the process if humanly possible. We're always shocked at the last minute, but most of the due diligence is done early in the game. So if there's going to be a problem, we typically know most of them in the first 60 days. And it's generally not that last week, but it happens. So we've got to maintain that constant communication and see where things are. And if they start asking questions that are geared a certain way, we might have an inkling that the problem might be something particular, and we can try and find a way to address it before they call with it.
Absolutely.
Add one more comment on this, and it's not a Crexi issue, it's a process issue, which is something that really I want to change within commercial real estate, and everyone on this call can be part of this, is we all know when you buy a home, you have a financing contingency, an inspection contingency, like all these defined contingencies. But in commercial real estate, we're kind of lazy, and we just say, we're going to have one big contingency, and it's going to go all the way to the very end. And the buyer can get out for any reason under a study period. And I would much rather see commercial real estate move towards financing contingency and inspection contingency so that you narrow down the risk of a deal not closing, because you're giving the buyer fewer and fewer outs. and let them sign off on the inspections. They still have financing as a contingency, that's fine, but don't give them a blanket out like a general feasibility study period has.
Yeah.
And
Well, I mean, I think that's a condition of the market, though. I mean, it sounds good in principle, but most buyers will say, "But that's what I've always got. Then I don't want to buy the property." So you'd have to have some kind of leverage. What I think we could do, though, is I pulled up our auction site. The way they do it in auctions is they do all the inspections up front. The seller gets the roof, gets all the inspections done. So when you put the property on the market, you say, "Here's the condition of the property. Here are all the reports. What else do you need to know? When do we close?" Maybe that's a strategy, or maybe something in between we could do. So I'm right behind you on that one, Stephen. You lead the charge, and then Loren and John and Ashley and I will come in right behind you, and then everybody else on this call, and we'll change the industry. That's what I mean. At the end of the day, all joking aside, that's what we're trying to do at Crexi. We started this platform to change the industry, to make it better. So I really appreciate what you guys have done for us, helping us we're helping you sell your properties. You're helping us by promoting Crexi and letting everyone out there know what we're up to and what we've been doing and how we can help them sell properties. Because at the end of the day, that's what Crexi is. It's a site that can actually help you sell and lease properties.
That's right.
Any closing thoughts there, Stephen? And I'll hand it over.
I cut my teeth doing real estate auctions for many, many years. And so I know with Century 21 Commercial New Millennium that we're going to be partnering with Crexi in order to promote auctions and see if we can even have quarterly auctions for our clients. Because there's going to be, in the world of COVID, there's going to be clients that have to sell quickly. But I also experienced firsthand for many years that auctions generate a tremendous number of leads. You get so many buyer calls. And so you not only get the property sold for a client that has an above average motivation, you may end up with 20, 30, 40 or more leads of new relationships.
Yeah.
And then those relationships, it's up to you to then take them to the next level. And you get many more leads off of an auction than you do even a brokerage deal. So looking forward to that. But we've really enjoyed the partnership with Crexi and looking forward to continuing that. Thank
you so much, Stephen. John, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, we talked about a lot in a short period of time. I too am a big fan of Crexi. I love the functionality of the tool. I think you guys have put a lot of thoughtful work into the design point, the way you price it. That was mentioned earlier. It's also good value. For the general person who's looking at commercial real estate, thinking about getting into it, I would just say, I love commercial real estate. I think it's so interesting. The fact that one day you're dealing with, a retail client, the next day it's government, the next day it's medical, the next day it could be farming. There's so many different industries that you touch. And if you're the type of person that likes to learn, which I am, I'm learning something new every day. I've been at this for a long time, but I'm learning something new every day. And I just think it's a very exciting place to work.
Yeah, absolutely. Loren?
Ralph Williams was one of my mentors, and he said, he was quoted as, commercial real estate's the tip of the iceberg of free society. If we can't own, buy, sell, and trade real property, we're not a free society. And I agree with that. I do want to point out some of the target marketing with Crexi is phenomenal. I think the software is wonderful. And I hope to see much, much more success from you in the future. I think it's a great platform, and I wish everybody well.
Yeah, well, thank you so much.
Paul?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to hijack your screen. Is that okay?
Yeah, and also just before everyone goes, I wanted to let them know how, which maybe is what you're going to do. Ashley and I were just going to show how, we'll talk about that, and also how they can activate their listings through Crexi. So you want to discuss that, or you want us to do it?
So I posted in the in the chat, not the Q&A. It's important for all of you to know, some people don't understand, you need to activate your Crexi account. And so what you're seeing on the screen is once you activate it, you get some of those resources free, right? You have that due diligence documentation dashboard you can go to, which is super important. But because Crexi is such an amazing partner, they're giving us Century 21 Commercial a 35% discount. So you go from $350 a month down to $228 a month. That's a pretty substantial discount, guys. So I can't stress enough to go on there. You can go month to month, try it for a month. I'm getting some really good feedback from all of our commercial brokers and agents out there about the increased leads. I appreciate the panel that's on here too, but look in the chat box, click on that link. If you have not activated your account, please do so. Otherwise, you will not get any leads on your properties that are actually being fed over there automatically from Dash, from our side. So I just wanted to make that quick announcement. It's important that you do that. And then I know there's a couple questions that came in too. Paul, do you want to add to that? I think there's a couple of questions Colin said that he got in the Q&A box.
Any good ones for us, Colin?
Oh, they're always good questions. Let's go. I'm wondering if we have, actually, it looks like one may have been answered. What are some strategies or approaches to working a listing that has been listed for a while by a few different brokers? And now it's all yours. Any strategies there? Side of price?
I'm going to just chime in because there's an old saying in commercial brokerage. It's good to be the first son, the second spouse, and the third broker. So it's always good to pick up a listing after a couple of people have been through it. But what are your thoughts? Loren, look like you got something to add there.
Nothing particular, but typically if it didn't sell, it was probably priced wrong and could have been marketed wrong. So part of it always has to do with the fact that you've got to go back in and reprice that asset and try and explain to them why it didn't sell. The other thing is you want to find out what that other broker did. Chances are they didn't do a whole lot. Some brokers were going to hide that listing and not put it out in the general public. They're not going to send it everywhere. Yep. And there's so many tools, so many methods of marketing real estate. You're going to take professional photos. You're going to do a video tour. You're going to get it on Crexi, which probably the last broker didn't do. You're going to upgrade it on social media. Century 21 is going to create a unique property website on that property for it. And we're going to use that unique property website to promote it through social media channels. We're going to syndicate that listing to 15 or 20 different spots. So there's a lot of things that we're going to do for you that the last person didn't do. And in addition to that marketing, we have to make sure that asset is priced correctly. So it's just going in and comparing yourself on a higher level to what they did last time, because chances are it was too high in price and they didn't market it the way they should have.
Yeah, absolutely.
I went the other direction. Well, not the other direction. It's the same concept on marketing, but is also to consider going the auction route, or even talking about, you can list it with me at X price for a certain amount of time, and then I can transition it over to an auction if that's what's needed. And you don't have to change brokers. We just change strategy. So instead of starting high and negotiating down, we're going to start low and negotiate up, and we're going to sell it that way. And maybe it just needs to be repositioned and with better marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. John, anything to add on that last question?
No, I think they covered it. I mean, basically,
yeah,
it's identifying what didn't work, and then making sure you don't repeat the same mistakes. You add value, figure out how you can add value on top of that. I think that's what everybody's.
Yeah,
I agree with what Loren and Steve just said.
Absolutely. Well, I want to hand it over to Ashley to close us down. Is there any other questions coming in?
One other question about working with trusts. Specifically, when you have a listing with a trust, do you need to work with the executor to sign, or what are some suggestions surrounding working with trusts?
I'm not going to touch that one. That sounds like legal advice. That's a legal question, but it depends on who is actually the signatory for the trust. That's more of a legal question that you're going to have to deal with.
And also, you need to understand it, because there could be a probate involved that could extend the amount of time it takes to close this deal. So both parties got to have their head wrapped around that at the beginning, because that can be something that can derail a deal. If you don't understand it up front and you don't disclose it up front.
Yeah, I would loop in your title attorney and just suggest you get a title search and then get their opinion and make sure it's all written correctly in the listing agreement and who has to sign, and just understand that authority. That's all. so they can pass title.
Yeah, yeah, good advice. Well, good. I mean, look, good. Right on an hour. I just want to hand it over to Ashley, just to close us down, say some closing words. And for me, I really appreciate hanging out with you guys for the last hour, and I learned something, and I'm sure everybody on the call did. Ashley?
Ashley, before you shut it down, just let me make a quick comment. I just got one question that came in the Q&A regarding what I said about Dash. So all property listings go into Dash. If you use a third-party integrated system, it's synced with Dash as well. All you need to do is enter it one time into Dash. It feeds over to Crexi automatically. So whether you're in the Louisville market or whatever market you're in, it will feed out there automatically. If you make an update, it feeds over there automatically. But the one thing that you do need to do is activate that account. So just make sure you activate your account to sign into Crexi. And then if you decide you want the pro plan or you want to try it out, that you can do that there. But the most important message here is activate your account. You can take advantage of all the cool things everybody's brought up. And I wanted to give a shout out to Stephen's dog. Loved the pop-up come a couple times. You know, that always is great on Zoom. So your dog's cute, Stephen.
What's the dog's name?
My wife and asked her to come get him because he was, you know.
No, I loved it. I loved it. That was awesome. So Ashley, I'll turn it over to you. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Guys. And just to piggyback off of what Randy was saying, I think that he had put the link in the chat here. So this is the page that he had put in there. So for all of the listings to sync, you either have to activate your account, so that's creating a new one, or just sign into your existing account. So if I'm brand new to Crexi and I just hit on activate my account, it's just gonna ask me to set my password, and then that'll give you the ability for everything to sync. So please do that so that we can automatically push your deals from Dash into Crexi. And then as everyone was showing, as Paul was showing here, all of the features and benefits of Crexi, these guys are all using it. And as Stephen said, hope is not a strategy. So it is the last day of the month. It's the last day of the quarter. Can't believe we're already halfway through 2020. Let us help sell your deals. Randy said you do get that 35% off discount, which is amazing. So please let us know how we can help you sell your deals. Would be happy to get you started today. Thanks again, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Be safe out there.
Thanks. Bye now. You too.
Thanks.